Done.
Okay, I suppose. All right. So, hello everybody. Welcome to this amazing talk that I'm going to be driving today. So, I want to do it more in a conversational style. I'm somewhat sick, so if I start coughing, might know why. Uh, Hopefully, I won't die in the middle of the talk. So, uh, the intent of this talk is to branch a little bit out of what I wrote in his presentation, um, to pick a grander scope out of something that I've previously been thinking about. And I think reading some of the passages that I have here, they might help elucidate the problem forthcoming. So, without further ado, let me start reading, and then I'll stop and keep changing the pace and fixing the stuff. I think this is fine, right? The font.
This is
Okay, so the name of the article is Method Worship. So let's see what it is about. So I was I was watching this documentary, Jus de Chic, I think, with Marcel Duchamp, and he's the guy who invented not invented, that's not him actually, but it's the guy that popularized the idea of Dadaism, right? So it's the art movement that propels forwards the idea of deconstruction, right? So um, if you go by Aristotelian definition of art, they are not classified in art, and that's what I follow. But if you go from an analytical standpoint of view, they are actually inverting this symbolism in art, in modern art. So either way, I don't like them, but regardless, I think they make some interesting remarks that I think are important to look at. So Marcel Duchamp himself was a interesting figure. And then he said something like this, and then I'll start reading this paragraph. Hopefully, it will make sense. Chess was a constant in Marcel Duchamp's life, a logical endeavor, or a Cartesian one, he said. It's about logic and mechanics rather than mathematics. And then here's a quote: Mechanics in the sense that pieces move, interact, destroy each other. They are in constant motion, and that's what attracts me. The custom This is a customary assertion that invites us to contemplate what irradiates from having a constant in our lives: transitions. So, I want you to notice a few things that he says here that I think are interesting in this quote. First one of them is that he sees it as purely mechanic, the idea of the pieces moving, interacting and destroying, which is a form of interaction, right? So this idea that the chess is not a mathematical endeavor. It's a more of a idea of applying logic to uh, a perhaps damp mechanics. So it's about making and foreseeing your movements and all of that. That's a very cold perception of uh, of life, and I think it invites us to look outwards on things that are very often taken for a given, which is change. So I'm gonna go into that. So this is a picture of him. I love this picture. By the way, this is a typo. It should be our downfall, but anyway, or his own downfall, as Benet said. But anyway, um, okay. So Heraclitus and his thought marked the transition between the anterior and the posterior Ionic schools. So the Ionic school was this primordial school in ancient Greece that was concerned mainly with identifying some cosmology by analogy of things. Today we look at that and say, like most people just laugh at it, saying, the Greeks really were that dumb to think that things come out of fire, come out of the sky, and all of that stuff, all of air. Um, but they fail to realize that this is the first step for them to try to understand things by analogy. Uh, as Plato later puts it, and Hugo of Saint Victor says on the what's the book, Didascalicum. He later puts this remark about the observation within fire, if I remember correctly, it goes something like this. Um, by analyzing fire, you see the things in the divine. By analyzing the earth, you see the earthly things, the things that come about from clay, and the things that can imbue some form in the material sense of the word. The air would represent, and so on. So, it's about looking at things as they are now and trying to find a explanation that comes outside of their simple, uh, simple contextual representation of what human language inserts on that thing to be, but instead of a metaphysical analysis. So that's why they are interesting. And then Heraclitus comes with the idea of change, trying to imputate a new cosmology in it. So reminder that Heraclitus also is from the, if I'm not mistaken, he's from the Anatolian side of ancient Greece, right? So he's also from the same region of the Ionic Islands. Anyway, altering its cosmology significantly. Observe that Heraclitus does not say, like a modernist would probably, that everything flows and therefore we cannot make any judgment about reality. This is a Hegelian interpretation of it, perhaps. It's an attempt to make it a remark about unity in diversity. He saw a principle of harmony between the interaction with change and the new cosmology of oppositions. The essence of being, however, as Aristotle later replies in his Refutations, is the reliance on the permanence within change. The perfection of being is in it not being susceptible to change. In this framework, then, something that exists change necessarily. Diversity within unity, while saying that it is part of reality's nature to be mutable. It is necessary to confess that all things are one. My pen, you, me, and my late cat Tixo. Yeah, that's the name of my cat, by the way. Are the same reality. In fact, even Newton himself had this notion when he added the idea of an absolute time to his physics. And also Pythagoras, who was much criticized by Heraclitus, by the way, with his Orphic tradition, from a more Orphic standpoint, reached the same foundation with music. The notion of eternity is fundamental to the idea of reality. So this is a strong quote, but I think I can back it up substantially. I remember of Earthbound, the game. Have you guys seen that? So there's this statue in Earthbound called the Money statue. I think I already mentioned about it, right? And it's the statue that represents the evil in the world. It looks like the Oscars, by the way. And then, oh man, Earthbound is amazing. And then there's this part on where you go into Ness's dream. Ness is the main character. And then you go in his dream, and then you see the past Nesses and the future Nesses, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Notice that all the perceptions the Ness has of himself as younger Ness and older Ness, they are all substantially real at that point. So when you have invoke a memory of something that already happened, physically that thing clearly has subsided here and now in the same respect, but that means nothing about that idea being projected immaterially as a event that has consequences on what you happen to persist in yourself right now. So the idea of reality here that's being propelled is that the diversity within unity means that things need to confess the same reality within them, so we can make this sense of diversity, or that is the sense of differentiation of essence in things, sharing the same context. So that's the foundations for the Aristotelian categories, just stretching a little bit. So that's the thing here. I could go more on this, but this is not really the focus, so I'm gonna keep going. But if there's any questions, I'm more than glad to answer. Okay. Oops. Continue here. Emacs doesn't have pixel scrolling, so that happens. I mean, it does now, has a package for that. But anyway, um, Duchamp's taste is rather peculiar when you put that into perspective. Atop of the notion of change perhaps I should have written, we can predicate the necessity of a constant. But how can we rely on a method to bring about knowledge? The method worship comes into play. I heard a talk of a clever fellow a while ago. He did something of true heart intent. He designed a meta language that has a auxiliary proof system to it that helps him to come up with a design for some world of discourse, and after the domain is in a decent shape, he so considers, he transcodes that to some higher level multi-purpose programming language and applies event sourcing to that domain, where these actions are mapping events, obviously. In the end, possibly without realizing, he is intending to design a normalized, that is, relational schema. It is exactly that, an isomorphic mapping between the world of discourse and the relations. So there's this guy that he came up and showed a very interesting project that he was making. It was his master thesis and so on. So he made a proof language, basically, that had a Z tree as a I forgot the name, solver, right, on top of it as machinery. And the thing that I found interesting there is that the guy made a whole effort to prove his domain and his decisions on the design. So he wanted to spend a maximum amount of time designing relationships between types and coming out with commands so that he could inject those things into event source decisions, and then from that generate events that he can later on project in whatever the way he wants. So it's funny because he mentioned in the middle of the talk and he was showing the diagrams and stuff that he was producing, and I quickly spot that he was basically doing all of that so in the end he could have a grasp on how to make a normalized design. And well, for those not aware what normalization might mean, it doesn't mean just removing nulls or going to third normal form to remove well, I'll not go into that, but anyway, it means bringing the business model closer to the key, which is the ontological truth of something, which means that the things are isomorphic with the domain of discourse, which is what you want to represent. Ultimately, that's what it is. So in the relational model, that doesn't mean SQL. SQL tries to implement the relational model. It fails to some extent, but it implements in a great extent as well. And it's a crappy language. But anyway, I need to say that. So anyway, continuing now. A friend wrote an interesting article enticed to debunk event sourcing just recently. And gazing at the responses is somewhat tragic. What event sourcing actually hardly matters as a topic for this discussion. So let's indulge into a Heraclean dialogue. So I'm going to ignore my personal opinions on event sourcing and what the article actually says about event sourcing. That's not the point here. But I think the responses they reveal a very much needed analysis on what I plan to introduce. Continuing. One trend seems awfully familiar in many branches of computation, and perhaps I dare say the most dangerous of them all. It is the perception that computers are mechanisms. It is the idea that the whole point of computation relies on an intoxication transition of states, change. This seems natural after all. Computers are things that we often relate to the Turing machine, or even as things that run algorithms. My claim, however, is that computers are abstraction automata. In a way, that is to say that computers do already reason, just like turtles and your most disliked politician do. So this is an excerpt, and then I'll go back to explain what I mean about this term, which, by the way, also has the idea of change. but I will explain further. So, um, so this is an excerpt of the of a comment. And by the way, this is a very big guy. I don't know his points, but this comment I think was rather unfortunate. It says, the motivation for event sourcing does not stem from any confusion, kind of insulting to the people that worked and proved its effectiveness as a default approach of line of business systems automation. Nothing simpler than capturing input data. He's trying to refute here a point that he made in the article that is ignorable. Versioning is one of the biggest benefits of event sourcing, only screwed up by inexperienced event sourcing practitioners. Blah 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 blah. Whatever. So this is the main point I want you to watch out. So, uh, sorry. So anyway, um, what I want to lead with this, and then I continue here, and this is a thing that I can talk later about what a guy wrote on Jung. It's the same idea, but I think for the scope. So here's the point. Notice that he's not talking about anything on trying to refute the main point. He's just trying to refute qualities of something. And mind you, that's a valid strategy, right? You can refute if something claims to be true in itself and it has some components of it that are untrue, then that thing can be proven to be false by induction, right? Because you have a component in it that is false. When you are trying to make the same proposition, however, um, for something that is doubly composed by these things, which is the case, what event sourcing is not really defined. And by the way, I've never seen anybody define that properly. Some people design as a design pattern, some people design as something else. So when you have these the circumstances, I think it becomes very hard for you to talk about something else that is not the method. And that's the next paragraph, and I went here before I go on the actual point of change. So note that in the middle of the jargons that you don't need to understand, that's just it's just a red herring to the point here. The corruption of any abstraction is that there is no mention of substance, only to its partial qualities. That's what I said. Potential qualities. No, sorry, not partial. Strangely enough, it doesn't seem to entice anyone that this is the so-called method worship. Instead of debating in terms of what something is, that is the essence and the foundation for the things to apply their effect on, which is the substance, we debate in terms of qualities of something. If they happen to be isomorphic after all seems to be just a matter of taste. So now I'll stop here. I'll stop this article, but I'll go back to the Duchamp here picture. So I'll drive with some examples. I'll code something prologue. But here's the point. When I say that computers are abstraction automata, that's because I think we have this mechanized view of computers, right? So, right, let's go to prologue. I'll just put it here. I think we have these very much, and that has its consequences. So, think about this. I'll ignore, well, actually, I'll put also in the basket Gödel's primitive and recursive functions, right? So if you put Gödel's recursive functions, lambda calculus, and Turing machines, they all are isomorphic, right? They all talk about the same thing. So in the idea of Gödel, it's about the idea of halting loops, like for loops in that sense people mention, but with recursive functions, so you're having a base to stop. That's why it only works on natural numbers. On lambda calculus, it's the idea of substitution, right, and reduction. And then in Turing machines, it's the idea of the transitions of states in the tape, right? Of observing things in the tape and trying to generate a new state out of that. So it's of the idea of memory, that is. So one thing that strikes to me in all of those is that they all have this same encoded idea that I'm gonna show in prologue right now, which is easier. So let me open a file and I'll type in my projects main.pl. And of course, PL it recognizes as Perl. So there we go.
A
Prologue.
question. I have a question.
Go on.
So before we go through the prologue stuff, I would like to
Mhm.
have a question first to discuss the answer of it, right?
Okay.
So you just said you just said that the three things are isomorphic, and
Mhm.
you mentioned before you asked the question if everything is isomorphic, it's just a matter of taste, isn't that right? I want us to discover why the
Well,
answer for this question is yes or no.
so let me backtrack a little bit. It's not because it's isomorphic that it's a matter of taste, right?
That's a
I
question.
think
You didn't say that. You asked.
yes. Let me put here. So I'll read this again. Instead of debating in terms of what something is, right? We debate in terms of the qualities of something. So we're not talking about the what makes that thing to be that thing, right? So
Exactly.
for example,
Is the
um,
Perseus ship or whatever?
yes, exactly. Like we're not talking. Yeah, it's the Chipotezeus.
Yes, I always get that wrong.
We're not talking about the uh, what makes the ship of Theseus be the ship of Theseus. We're talking about the planks that make the ship, right?
Exactly.
And then if you change all the planks, then it's a different ship. So what happens after that? So for you to debate in those things, you have to abstract the context up from what you are observing, right? There's no way about it. And then what I see often is people just condemning the qualities of things. Man, no one in this comment section. I mean, some of these people weren't even like trying to debate, but uh, there were like people who made good answers. Like there's my colleague there that he made a good point. I still think he's wrong, but he made a good point regardless because he's on another abstraction level than most people there are, and I think that's great. That's in great danger. And why am I saying this matters? And then this comes the question: if they happen to be isomorphic after all, so what is they here?
The alternatives.
The alternatives, right? So if they're all equal, right? It seems to be just a matter of taste. So
Yeah, but that's to me the problem because to me, in that post that you mentioned in on the comment section, nobody was attempting to say what the X is, and if you
yeah,
don't know what it is, you cannot make the isomorphic bridge. Hence, it is not a matter of taste anymore.
exactly. So oops, let me go back here. So here's my point about states, right? If you do you agree that if you look at let's think of an imaginary let's dream a little bit. There's a dice, okay? So we use dices to what? To like play D&D, to gamble, to play blackgammon. Uh, what else? Uh, I don't know what else to play Monopoly, whatever.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty much it.
so there are many uses for dice, right? Um, if you happen to go to I don't know if aliens dropped in here tomorrow, and then they like humanity wiped out. There's no one left, and there's just a dice. Okay, so everything got pulverized, and somehow there's just a dice. So they somehow they discovered that there was trace of life here, and they are trying to understand it. By an Aristotelian point of view, they could reach. There's the possibility of them understanding the point of the dice because it was the same foundation for reality that brought about humanity that they now experience it just in different conditions, right? In a different environment with things. Um, but the possibility of understanding what a dice is there. So things like that movie that came out at some point of like a linguist trying to communicate with aliens that are like weird and they can't because they're like in a different transcendental point of view. Like that's just bullshit. Like that's not something that uh, is plausible in this framework. Um, if you let me just see the okay, yeah, that's true. Linux die, right? That's a website I should know. Uh, so I forgot what I was going to. Yeah, so about that change. So do you agree that if you look, however, the thing from a different angle, it will change your perception of that thing because you are just looking at the phenomena that instantiates that particular thing, not about what it is. So one thing is for me to understand what a dice, what's the purpose of a dice, right? Another thing is for me to understand the usage that somebody gives to a dice, how a dice is shaped. Like there are many types of dice, right? They're like the ones that are like the triangle ones, the pyramid ones, and the D10. Like that's one type of die, right? That is used on D&D, whatever. So, uh, so there are multiple phenomena, but they're different phenotypes. But there's only one idea, universal idea, which is their purpose. I don't know what it is, but that's the point. Um, the thing that makes you susceptible here to uh, fail in your judgment, I think, would be to not understand the possibilities that that thing may have, that the possibility of your current worldview, Weltstand in German. I probably butchered the word, but to, to use the phenomena around you to understand that thing, right? So, uh, if I'm looking from my background, like the things that I learned in my past, so the notion of reality, that's why I mentioned that thing. So I'm looking as the Magetta that has already been burnt with event sourcing, that has seen those things. Like if I'm just looking for those angles, of course I'm gonna be biased, right? That's the whole point of it because I experienced those things in the past. The same way that I don't know somebody might be burned with relational databases because I don't know of MySQL, right? And then you might like complain, oh no, for joins are just for loops nested, blah blah blah. And then you go on the machinery and you have your fine. The point is you are aligning now the decision to the method, not the essence. You see? Because now the methodology, which is exploring the senses, they are driven by observing uh, not observing the true intent of the thing, which causes its final cause, which is the purpose of something. And now you're just susceptible to uh, failure. Like, of course, you are susceptible to failure, in regardless. But I think going for phenomena is you are if you even if you get it right, you're getting something right in an instance of something, not immaterially something.
Yeah, you
So
cannot
you're not
compare
discovering
things. You cannot
you're not
compare them only by their methods.
you're not discovering universals. You're discovering particulars that came out of this method. So that's not very helpful. So anyway, I'll come off with. Uh, so here's the thing. Um, Notice that all of the three modes of computing, they are all relational because of the idea of change. Change is relational, right? So think about it. When I type in Prolog, let's say ABC, I could certainly come up with something better like this, than this in Prolog, but anyway, bear with me. And then I do ABC, and then XYZ of X and Y, right? Yeah, let's spice it up. Let's put one here, okay? Uh, and then this, and when that is true, and then yeah, okay. So when that is true, and this is true, DF. Y 1, 2, 3. Actually, let me put an atom here. Let me put Youpie. Yeah. Yep, that's fine. And then dot, right? So what am I doing here? I'm saying I'm relating this to be true. Let's remove this one. It's useless. I just wanted to do multiple. That's fine. We are relating here x to like this variable x with this statement here is valid. So it could be like Lemus is cool, right? So let me just put this window here to the side because it's bothering me. There we go. So if I say Lemus is cool, so this is my predicate, right? And then I have this x. Don't know. This would be true. So Lemus is cool depending on x. That's a terrible example. I go, and then I say that only depends if this is true and this other thing is true. This is why the Erlang thingy comes from, because it's the joint statements. So you're doing an end statement here. So these two things need to be true, so that happens, right? So X, Y, Z. So Lemos is only cool if Marinho is cool. And what's the name of their guest? Uli. So Uli is cool. There we go. So that's nonsensical. Don't bother with it. But the point is, if this is true, and this is true, this is true. How is this true? Well, we need to define it. And then that would be yep on the second, on the Marinho, and trash on the first. And that's it. That's a fact. So Marinho picks trash and yup. And Uli picks yup and Sega Tetris. Because I love this game. It's just amazing. Anyway. So that's our predicates. We look deranged? Maybe. But that's the point. So I'm going to spell shell here. And I will increase a bit, because maybe this is too little. I don't remember how you load this. Let me main PL. Error, no precision, blah, blah, blah. Static predicate. Was it double? No, that's not double. What do I mean? Wait, let me just evaluate things.
I think it's dash colon or colon dash, right?
Are you sure? Let's see. I don't remember the syntax. There's this website called Learn X in Y minutes, and then you just type the language, and then there's like.
I don't think it's an arrow there. I think Marinho is right. It's column dash. The arrow is Erlang peeled.
Oh, right, that's true. It is. Wait a sec. Yeah, that's right. It's this here. I'm mistaken with this here. That's something else.
Yeah.
So, oops, I already evolved it. There we go. So that is true now. Can change it. So you take trash and yup money. And this broke because prolong prompt. What? Oh, I think he bugged the terminal. Okay, yeah. And then this next, it's a composition of the other two. And it broke again. Man, let me try loading. I'm using eShell, so that's curse. Out. Please just exit. Thank you. Right. So sweepl may. Thank you. Oh no, it blew up again. Did I? I didn't save. That's stupid. Out. There we go. Now it works, I guess. So if we ask Marinho is cool, there should be a question, right? Not this. But and then we ask what is cool for yup, then that's trash, right? If we ask Marinho is cool, and then X and Y, it will restrain to that combo. If we add another statement, it will loop on the other statement, right? So you guys got the gist of it. But now if we ask Lemos is cool, and then we ask what is the X, it's false. Because there is no X, generic X, right? So it will, I have to ask a question of what the X is. So Lemos is cool. And then what is the X? The X is this, which is true if it's trash. So if it is Lemos is cool with picking trash, then that's false. Because did I do a mistake here?
The yup for Uli is on the right, but it
Oh,
is
that's
only
true.
cool if it's on the left.
Thank you.
That's
Yes, that's true.
exactly it.
Actually, yeah, it should be yup. And then we don't care about this. Let me pick this. And I don't think I will be able to load this. So let me do. I hope this works. It doesn't. Thank you.
Rules must be loaded from a file.
There. Okay. So that's loaded now. Let me copy this. Still false. Crash. False again. Did I wait, is it right now? Yup. Y. Marinho is cool, which is this and this. Oh, this is not Y. Then there's no relation, right? So there's two things here. Although that should be true anyway. But so this must be the same as this, which in turn must be the same as this Y. And this Sega Tetris, we can even remove it together. Doesn't matter. Okay. Lemons. I hope now I don't embarrass myself. So now with trash. True. Okay. So now we're right. So what happened here is that we're looking at the predicates that form the whole proposition, right? And then if this is true, then this is true, and then that's basically by looking at this guy and looking at this guy. Where is the transition of states here? It's within the relationship between the variables that are found within the different predicates. How do you break this? Think about it. The idea of Haskell, like how do you break the idea of purity in lambda calculus? Tell me something, Lemus. Purity, like a classic. How do you
Uh,
break purity?
okay, so the question is, how do you break purity?
In a functional language, yes.
Well, you just need to do a side effect of some sort.
You do IO, something like this, right? The launch an exception.
Yeah, no,
Those
but you need to do that in an undisciplined manner.
yeah, yes, that's what I meant, right? Reading a file and then changing the state, right? If it's something that handles the state of the world and then changes the state of the world inside of then that's safe, right? Uh, and then you would need to do a mono transformer. But if it's just 100% pure, then you can't have this breakage in the state changes. The thing that can happen here is if I do a socket access in Prolog, it will break, right? So what you are breaking in the logical programming framework is the idea of inserting a different state from outside of the computation predicates.
Unpredictable
The,
state
the
introduction.
unpredictable state, that's a good, yeah, thank you. Unpredictable state introduction for the computation of the predicates. So I'll bring another example. There's this library here. Let me pick the link for you. It's PO. I like the name. Here, library PO. So if anyone that wants to take a look, I found that out recently. That's
I will
very
put that in
interesting.
the the description as well.
So PO basically it has a parser, DFG parser, and then it allows you to do some interesting stuff. So let me see here. It has a thing for purity of inputs and outputs on strings. So it handles things with coroutines uh, in lists essentially, and that's how it achieves purity in Prolog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing that I find interesting is if you use, let me just put it here. I would, well, just let me see the function. G. There we go. So it's like this. So let me try to use something here. So it is this. I don't remember. I didn't remember this, but hopefully, if I do this, library PO, and I save, hopefully I should things. So there's this thing for defining a file. Okay. So there's this guy that made. I think I have it somewhere instead of typing. There we go. So here I can explain. It's from a guy on. He made an example on. I'll send here the link as well. There we go. It's from Stack Overflow. And then he's basically talking about how to use PO on reading a lines in a file. So it's basically gonna do the very simple. It's gonna pick okay, a line is, and that's the thing I'll say. It's describing the grammar. So lines means you call this guy, okay, which is this, which is the relationship between an empty string and an empty string, which is the end of the string. Uh, and then if it reaches this guy, then you can already cut off the branch. So this, oh wow, that's a very long documentation. Thank you. But that basically means like prune the branch. So if you reach down the prolog inference, if it reaches down the branch, cut it. Like that's not a branch you want to keep going. There's nothing to do here. Um, and then a normal, if it's something else, the other description is if it's a line, you're gonna, well, pick the rule of a line, print it, print this thing here, and then go back to iterating with lines. And then that way you just go processing line by line and printing it, right? So what's a line then? It's a thing that will be with a dash n, a slash n, and an end of string. And then you cut the branch. Otherwise, it's just a thing with text that you don't care, and then you just keep going. That's basically iterating over something like this. So ABC text. A, B, C,
I
D,
have a question.
E, F, G. Go on.
Would it be fair to say that in this implementation that you just explained, we are describing what is a file relationally?
Exactly. That's the whole point. And I can show another example that I think beautiful if we have time. I think I've been talking too much already. But I think the what I want to take of this, okay, before I get off, is that the differentiation between the application of substitution of a Turing machine state. What it's easy to say what is a state in a Turing machine transition, right? It's literally like a uh, like a tape moving, right? That's simple. And then you can take a reasoning on the automata. The whole idea of the automata, though, can describe something, a procedure, if you can abstract the interactions with it on the tape, for example, the Turing machine. You can apply the same for a lambda calculus reduction, right? Or you can apply that for uh, Gödel's completude recursive functions. That too. So the foundation for all these things in the end, and
Okay.
that ties perfectly to what you said about the other day on functions
Yeah,
relation.
no, this, as far as I can tell, the conclusion is once you have different things that attempt to solve the same problem, you can only create a criteria for comparison between them once you abstract them out to see if they are
Which is the
share the same
relation.
essence.
Exactly. Man, thank you. That's the whole point that I wanted to make on this. Like, you can't just go about trying to make a general statement, right? Which are like ought tos, like I should, blah blah blah. I
I
should use
must.
X. I must, blah blah blah. Things are like these kinds of things. Those are general statements, right? They invoke generality. You can't make those statements if you don't grasp what the actual foundation for these things are, instead of just focusing on specific qualities.
You
If
need
I
to
happen to say
understand the permanence within the change.
exactly, thank you. I don't need to say anything. You got the point.
Okay, Marinho, is that clear to you? Like, am I saying nonsense?
Maybe.
You are not saying nonsense, in fact.
Okay, so now that I think, well, Willie had to go unfortunately, but now that we got the point, I would like to ask Magetta a question. Because I was talking about this with my dad yesterday, by the way.
Okay.
Like I was actually mentioning to him, Dad, my friend Magetta did a very cool article. But I don't know if Magetta understands how deep of a conversation this is. Because I was trying to understand, why does this happen? Why do people make general statements without being able to abstractly understand the essence of something before going to war about it?
Mm-hmm.
And my conclusion, which I think it's maybe it's not the real conclusion, but my attempt of one until this moment is, you can only tell the essence of something.
There you go. Right.
Yep, you can only tell the essence of something if you understand how to think in abstract terms.
That's
Okay, my connection is completely fucked. I'm gonna move out. That happens sometimes.
Really nice way to do I/O, I must say.
yeah,
Okay,
man. Because it's
I'm back.
it's
Hello.
crazy because it's basically binding the idea of IO in the predicate, right? That's beautiful, and that's something that like you can only grasp the actual problem if you understand that the idea of change is just imbued in a different way, but it's still the same thing. Otherwise, like you see, like this idea of observing the same phenomena in two different places, it's only possible if you can abstract the phenomena from the phenomena and understand what it actually is occurring,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So before I
And
dropped out, I was trying to talk about a little bit about that. Why do people have difficulty doing that exercise? And my conclusion was yesterday talking to my dad, it's just lack of philosophy. It is just that they don't understand the value of it.
Man, if you go back to the past century, let's say, if you pick like Charles Babbage, or I'll pick Bo, okay, he's often taken like as a computer scientist, blah blah. What was the guy doing? He was trying to encode Aristotelian logic in a machine, right? So the guy knew what philosophy, at least in its superficial standpoint. Like the guy, I don't even know if he read like metaphysics and all that stuff, but certainly he inherited from a cultural legacy. That's one that was far more educated in this topic than we are. And second, he also read the bare minimum to have that knowledge to begin with, to try to bring about that materialize, right?
No, yeah, you don't need to have a PhD on it. I'm not saying you should need a PhD on it. It's just that you need to be able to think in abstract terms in order to attempt to understand the essence of things. You
Yep.
cannot not do that. You need to be able to do that.
Another thing that astonishes me is like when people find an enormous idealizing how a abacus is a computer, right? Man, if you pick, I have an abacus here. Give me a sec.
What a Chad.
amazing.
What a Chad. Um,
There you go. So here's an abacus. Okay, I took it for teaching like children basically how to count, how to do math. So I think it's easier this way. So what is this, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 little balls for everything, right? And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if you pick this last thing here to be something like, for example, uh, units, then you can take, uh, well, 1, 10, 100, 1,000, and you just go increasing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can represent any number up until here, right?
Pretty much.
So eventually it will overflow, right? But if you want to sum, like it's very easy. You just do, okay, how much is 8 plus 5 plus 5? Well, you pick 5 balls. One, monkey does this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then monkey does this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How much is one of these? Well, it's one of these. So you got the 10,
Yep.
right? So you filled one of these, it's one of these. You
Yep.
filled all of these, it's one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start doing like all sorts of mathematics. But if you think about it, what an ALU does, isn't it the same thing? That's the
Yeah.
same thing. That's the
Yeah.
carryover bit, right?
Yep.
So the point still remains. I think there's mold. So
Yeah. So
the
before we
point.
go,
Okay.
I would like to address a thing because maybe some people will watch this and ask, how is this any related to engineering? So I would like to address that. This is related to engineering because we need to be able to compare solutions, right? So if there is something that we people are claiming solves a particular problem, and there's another competitor that claims to solve the same one, how we need to, as engineers, need to be able to compare those two things. And the first step to that procedure is to ask the question, do they actually solve the same problem? That's the question. And you
I'll say
cannot answer that without knowing what they are.
I think you're giving one example, right? But I'll give a more. I'll try at least to make a more general statement. Engineering itself is a abstraction, right?
Of course it is.
So, for example, biology or chemistry. I'll pick chemistry. Okay. People laugh today at alchemy, for example. So when people are doing like the idea of alchemy, they're talking about like social engineering, right? What the heck does that have to do with alchemy? Well, it's the same process of dissolving a chemical compound, right? So it's no surprise that most of the initial chemists uh, they were into alchemy. Like for example, the guy who discovered benzene, I think it's Kekulé, if I'm not mistaken, he's Czech. He literally had a dream about Ouroboros eating itself, like a snake eating itself, and then he thought of the benzene, and then he made plastic. Like that's the foundation for plastic. So, crazy story, funny. The point still remains, which is it's still an abstraction out of a more general science, right? So it's not just uh, incorporation of like it's funny because people try to bash away with okay, so people try to bash away idea of philosophy just like as a boring people talking like in a chair doing nothing all day, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays it probably feels like that, but I think observing like the whole point of the metaphysical of doing a metaphysical analysis of a body is to understand what's the limitations of that scope and expand that scope as you incorporate something new, so you don't worship science. People did with Newtonian mechanics for a long time, trying to explain the whole universe phenomena that they saw working, and then comes a German dude and then says, hey, this problem here doesn't seem to be working, and proves that everybody was wrong for this specific case, blah blah blah, and then that's somehow a revolution in science because that's a ill-fitting design in the not design, sorry, an ill-fitting abstraction now needs to be refined with further uh, with further observations that you might have, right? So it's not like something that is only set in stone and then that's it, like for all eternity. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you might find something like that. The possibility of you finding that is.
Yeah, but then it comes the question: how do you, if you're not doing,
How do you
how do you
know?
draw the line of worship and defense? Because if people are attacking the way that you're
Hmm.
solving a problem, and you see that your solution is the one that makes sense or it fits or it best solves it, you need to be able to defend that. And my understanding, as far as I can
That's a
tell,
good
to do
question.
that is to talk about what the problem is and what the solution is. You're not talking about the qualities of the solution. You're not talking about it is fast. You're not talking a bajillion people
It's a scale
improved on
able.
it. Yes, you're not doing any of that. You start by saying this the problem is this. This is the description of my problem. This is
Mhm.
what the solution is, and you explain how one solves the other. If it just so happens that the implementation of the solution is slow for your purpose, then you need to make what we call in engineering a trade-off. Because now you need to be aware of what you're trading because you already defined that this
It's the
solves the
point.
problem.
Yep, it's the point of for example, uh, I'll give one example of the photos. So, is it relational to store photos outside of the database and put a pointer pointing to an S3 bucket? That's not. Does that translate into higher costs if you're using a cloud because the size of pictures in a intense usage will just explode the usage on your database? Yes.
Yes.
So if you know that, you're taking and you know that you're breaking some part of the relational model because of the constraint of cost, because you don't want to pay $1 million to Amazon per month, then that's a different question than just going there and bashing the idea altogether, like which you see everywhere.
Everywhere.
Like so, people most often don't know how to explain, and then you become like you enter in these Groundhog Day discussions, like like whack-a-mole, like comes the mole, and then you just
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the game.
Yeah, I know that game.
Yeah. So it becomes kind of that discussion because here's what happens. I'll describe the flow, how it works. It's like this. Uh, oh, I want to store files on my database. I want to store like PDFs on my database. Oh no, you should not do that because it's slow. Okay, I have this method that can serialize the files faster and it will make it faster, blah blah blah, so it will not be slow. Oh no, but if you store the files like that, it will not make now scalable. Oh, actually, I can partition, blah blah blah. You see, you're just qualities, not if it is correct or not to do that,
Yeah, no,
and
and
then
even worse.
inserting later the qualities to see if that makes sense as a
Even worse.
feasible engineering solution.
If you put the PDFs in the database and somebody says it's slow, the first instinct natural to me is, does that matter? Does that
It's a good
matter?
point.
It's slow, sure, whatever. Does that matter to my problem? Because
Most of the
maybe
time,
you have like 5 requests per second or something, which means that it doesn't really matter. So if it matters, then you do what Magetta said. But
the
if it doesn't,
the proper solution might end up being more expensive, right?
yeah,
That's an engineering solution. That's an engineering solution.
yeah,
That's not a yeah.
yeah. Just to wrap this up, because we just on the dot of 1 hour.
And by the way, the classical idea of engineering uh, is the same idea of economics in the sense that it's manipulating finite resources. So
Finite
yes,
resources.
it's
It was all linear logic all along.
right.
Yeah. So what is another practical conclusion of this conversation? Because maybe I still haven't convinced whoever is watching this. Every time somebody mentions the relational model, if you mention SQL, you didn't get it. You didn't get it.
Yes,
Start
you
over.
didn't get it.
You
SQL
completely
is
didn't get it.
not the relational model. Yes.
Yeah, so and I understand that because again, I had some colleagues doing my masters that I could see with my own eyes the difficulty of distinguishing between what you can touch, it's palpable, like you can
Mm-hmm.
code, and what is
What
the
monkey sees?
inspiration or the model, the mental model or the
Is this
mental
computer?
constraint.
Is this computer? Monkey doesn't see computer.
Exactly. So you need to be able to distinguish those two things. And you may ask, why should I be able to do? Why should I need that? The
Mm-hmm.
answer is because if you now are able to distinguish between what the something is and its implementation, you can now have the luxury of having the same thing with different implementations, like
Exactly.
SML.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole point.
Like scheme or common list.
Like scheme, like common list, all those things are the same thing. You
Even
understand,
Prolog, right?
even Prolog, yes. You understand the higher level stuff, and then you can have multiple alternatives of the low level implementation nonsense stuff.
By the way, that's a awesome way to learn a language. You just learn general, and then once you learn general grammar, you learn a particular grammar, and then you just abstract where this particular language applies on the general grammar, right?
Yeah,
Because all of them will follow the same rule. They will just change the particular rules of the language.
yeah. This was awesome talk. I appreciate that. Marinho, do you have
As
anything
well.
else before I press the button here?
Bye, future people.
Always.
Okay,
Right?
so last words, Marinho. Marinho, no, Magueta. I'm gonna press the button.